But it was, you were told it was illegal, and in fact, somebody up New Road, the police actually called to get it.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm just going to swap my batteries about. This thing seems to be eating batteries like nobody's business. So I'm just going to check this, because I just put these in new 5 minutes ago and they've gone down already.
Shouldn't do that when it's hot weather.
What's that?
Batteries. I mean, normally it's when it's cold that they
Yeah.
struggle.
So our dad taught us in the war.
Put them in the oven to warm them up.
Warm them.
Keep them in your
Mind you, we
pocket.
go back to the old accumulators when we had to go under Mr. Morgan with an accumulator to get it charged up for the wireless. Why they call it a wireless when it's full of wires, I haven't a clue.
I know our dad put the fear of God in me. He said, make sure you don't tip that over.
The acid.
Because the acid, and I used to be dead scared of him.
There you go, you weren't that old then, were you? Less than 6 when you had to do that.
I was born in Wiltshire, and 7th of June, 1934.
Thank you. And your name?
Terry Rouse.
Thank you.
I'm his younger brother Don, born the 2nd of June 1937, on the side of the A4 in Wiltshire. In a house.
Okay. Thank you. So, where did you both grow up? Your younger
Well,
brothers?
I would say a little village called Burrington, where you've probably heard the hymn Rock of Ages cleft for me. That was my first school, and it was Terry's. Was it your first school?
My first school.
And then in 1943 we moved up here to Bampton.
And can I just ask you a little bit about your family? Your father, what did he do?
He was a farm manager.
And is that why he moved to Bampton, why the family moved to Bampton?
Yeah, he changed jobs. He used to work for...
Well, I always used to say, in the days of the tied cottage, right, it was important that if the farmer said that cow over there, that black cow over there is white, you said, yes, Gaffer, he's white, because if you argued with him, you were out of house and home. Now, I was born in Wiltshire, I spent a year in Dorset, and we moved to Somerset, and then we come up here. By the time I was 6, I lived in 4 different houses because our father was a volatile person and he didn't like anybody telling him what to be doing. So
he used to come home and say to Mum, pack the grandfather clock up. And that was when she knew that she was on the move.
So you moved around quite a bit then, until you came
here. Yeah.
And who did your father work for in the village then, here? Was there a particular farmer?
George Collins.
And where was the farm?
Weald Farm, about 200 yards from 300 yards from here where we're sat now, was Weald Farm. And then that was 1943, 1948, Dad fell out with him and set up his own farm in the other end of Bampton. Which was, I will be telling you later on about the prisoner of war who actually helped him get the farm in order.
Right. So can I just ask a little bit about Weald Farm? What sort of farming was done on that farm?
Mixed. He had a dairy herd and he also grew cereals.
And potatoes?
Oh, potato crumbs, yeah, potato. We used to get into trouble with potato picking.
Yeah, and there was a lot of hoeing involved for mangles. He grew mangles for the cows to eat, so there was hoeing there. He grew a lot of sugar beet, this was the war years, and sugar beet played an important part in the war years. And so that's why the German prisoners of war were needed to come there.
And so who worked on the farm? Did he have Land Army girls working there?
He had Land Army girls.
He denies it. But I know he had one, Jean Sharp.
That I'm going to say. And yeah, the German prisoners, I mean, they did ditching all around, from the river back up towards Bampton. I didn't know until on one of the dropways, the headstone, they printed their...
So on the wet concrete, they would they would sign it. You're doing a bridge over a ditch, and the wet concrete on the side, they would put the names in it.
POW.
And is that still there now?
I don't know.
We had so many of them pushed out, and I can't remember which one it was that I saw it written on.
It was part of the war, actually, you know, the agricultural efforts during the war. But the thing that used to tickle Terry and me is we would have to walk past this house where we are now. We would walk past it to and from school, and it's fair. What was I, 6, and Terry would have been 9. So it's quite a long walk to school. It's almost a 2-mile sort of thing. And when we were coming home from school would be the time that the lorry would come to pick up the German prisoners of war. And it was incredible because you'd have this probably a 3-ton Bedford truck to carry about 20 men in the back, and there'd be one British Tommy soldier there with one rifle. Well, they could have pushed him clean out the back and ran off. But that was always coming home from school, and they would go past us to go and pick up the POWs.
And so the POWs that it was picking up, they were all working on the farm?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know where their camp was?
Yeah, it was at Curbridge, the next sort of 2 villages up from here. And there was a big camp there. I mean, I was only 6 and Terry was 9 when we came here, so we wouldn't have a clue what arrangements was made. But I would assume that Father, being the farm manager, would phone in and say, well, right, we're haymaking today, I need 20 men, or hoeing or whatever. He would say how many men he needed, and they would then send them out.
Can I ask your father's name?
Reg
Reg.
Reg Rice.
Reg Rice. Thank you. And so the camp, did you ever see it? Did you see where it was?
Oh yeah, yeah. That hut was there until the 1960s. The hut was still there.
Sorry, I meant the camp which the prisoners came from. The bigger camp.
Yeah, at Curbridge.
It was all. So how
It
big
wasn't
it?
it wasn't that big.
Right.
It wasn't that big. It would probably house 40, 50 people.
So was it single?
It was one single wooden long shed, as I remember it.
Right. And whereabouts was it? Can you recall?
Yeah. You know, on the A4095 Bampton to Whitney Road, there's a staggered crossroad in the village of Curbridge, where you can go left to Bryce Norton or right to Ducklington. And it was just past there on the north side of the A4095.
No, thank you.
Go.
And the prisoners that were here, working on the farm, did you ever have any contact with them? Or were you at school all the time when they were...
I had contact with them at weekends. You had more contact, because by the time I come home from school, it was probably 5 o'clock time.
He's showing off that he went to grammar school. he passed a scholarship.
So did he. So did he.
He passed a scholarship, and because the bus that took people to the grammar school from Bampton started at Blackborton, so therefore the children of Bampton had to ride their bikes to Blackborton, and that was more than 2 miles away. So he was given a bike because he passed the 11 plus. So my dad said to me, "There, son, if you want a new bike like your brother, you get and work hard and you pass your 11 plus and you'll get yourself a new bike." So I worked very hard, I passed my 11 plus, and that was the year the bus went from Bampton.
One of those things.
Yeah,
Well, it's a story of my life. He got all the good stuff and I came second.
oh dear.
The prisoners of war then that were working on the fields, were these Italians or were they Germans, or was it both?
They were Italians to start with, and then when the push got into Germany, and we had more German prisoners, then they changed over, didn't they? So I don't know what happened to the Italian.
But it was an interesting thing in my history of that period of time. It was Italian prisoners of war were first, obviously, because Italy fell before Germany, and they were shipped over here, and that's when we started to have them actually billeted with us. So we had 2 Italian prisoners of war billeted with us, as well as other groups of Italians, because obviously they, being in that camp at Curbridge, you had the same, you had continuity, which of course was a good thing. As has been said before, they were lazy. They were terribly, terribly lazy. But once the Italian prisoners of war went, the German prisoners of war came in. And believe it or not, after then, if you remember, Ted, that it was the displaced persons. Have you come across that?
Yeah, yeah.
As the displaced people, your Yugoslavs, your Poles, your Czechs, and that sort of thing. And so you had them coming over and working on the farm.
Right. Do you remember any of the particular prisoners? Are there any people you befriended or
Oh,
characters?
absolutely. The Italians, there was a fantastic, responsible Italian called Angelo, and he was loved by the whole family. Aunties and that come to stay with us, they just got on so well together. He was a fantastic bloke. But there was others there was one called George who was absolutely incredibly good looking and had all our aunt, Auntie Beryl and that, they were sort of going all gooey and you know, but that was the Italians. But it was too far back in my memory, and about yours, Ted, that I can't remember the actual ones who stayed. I do remember Angelo and I do remember Giorgio, I think it was. I remember them clearly.
No, I can't remember them at all.
I know Dad caught them because we had a lot of hens, chicken houses with hens there, and Dad caught the Italian prisoners of war coming out of the chicken house with a couple of eggs in their hands, cracking them and eating them raw. So they were nicking them and eating the raw eggs, just like that. But then, once the Italians were then quickly replaced with, there was no overlap that I remember, but it certainly was one had gone, the other was straight in to take over. And we had 2 wonderful German prisoners of war stay with us. They were absolutely brilliant people, totally different in character. Totally different character. One was, I also think that the dower, to be, Willie was a bit sort of harsh, not a warm person. I think, maybe it's just the way I've grown up thinking, well, East Germany, that's how they are. But I do know that they were going to be they were from different parts of Germany, that Arthur was one side and Willie was the other side. Arthur was quiet, easygoing, but both of them were doing it for you. And earlier on you were interviewing Jo about her father speaking German. Our father learned to speak German because the Germans taught him. Didn't he? He could hold a conversation with the German. And what he did was with these 2 Germans, he would spend no television, and he would go around and sit and talk to them at night. And so he would write down the English for a table, and then the German would write down the German for a table. And all this sort of thing, that is how Dad learned to speak German, which had its good sides, because when you were out in the field hoeing, and you had 20 or so German prisoners of war home with you, Dad would hear the lazy Germans saying to each other, "Langsam, langsam," which means slow down. Well, Dad knew what they said, so snow, snow.
And where did they stay? You mentioned that you would be with them in the evening, so they were billeted with you. What was the accommodation that they had?
It was their own accommodation. It was, and it was the tin shed. I suppose it would have been our.
But it'd be, what do you call it, the boiler house, where the copper was for heating your water in those days, for your bath and to do your washing and all that sort of thing. And that was all, that's right, and it was all part of that building. And the crazy thing about it, when you have watched these films or read stories of what the British prisoners of war had to put up with in Germany, I remember this escapade vividly. Was they had welfare officers come to inspect the conditions that these Germans were living in. Well, the first one was the Italians, and the Italians had the nerve to complain that the cow had fur inside it. Unbelievable. You know, there's our lads in real dire straits, and these Italians complaining because there was fur in the cow.
But the story I always remember is that I must have been amongst the people that were building the inside, because they had separate bedrooms, didn't they, and communal living room. And the chaps from Royal Corps of Signals was helping Dad. I think there was 2 of them. Was helping Dad build these bedrooms and that. And they, these 2 signals complained that what they were building was better accommodation than what they had at the camp.
The camp was 300 yards up the road from them, and the signals had 1 blanket, whereas they had 2.
Right, so the camp that the signalsmen were in was in the village as well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For want of a better description, yes. Only about half a mile from where the German prisoners of war, but it's all on the outskirts of Bampton.
And I think you mentioned another story when the welfare...
Oh my God, yeah. That, do you know what? That, to this day, that still makes me go cold. And that was the German welfare officers came out, and they were expected, and the 2 German prisoners of war came to meet them. So right outside our front door, the German prisoners of war and their officers, the welfare officers, did the Heil Hitler salute, said, "Heil Hitler!" And I, "You buggers, we're winning and you're here, you know." But yeah, they actually did the Heil Hitler salute outside our front door, and that rankles with me to this day.
And was that Arthur and Willie?
That was Arthur and Willie, yeah.
So I assume that this was when the war was still going on, or was it?
I would have thought so, yes. Yeah.
So they were with you then from 45 onwards?
40, I would probably said 44, and then an interesting thing that happened between them. Our dad was a big man. He feared absolutely nobody, feared nothing. Hence we were always moving around the countryside. He feared nobody. And these 2 Germans one night had an almighty row, and it was nasty. And Dad went and got a bottle in there, a big wine bottle or a lemonade bottle, I don't know what it was, but he sat on the table between them, and he warned them that if one got out of hand, he was cracking over the head with it, and he wouldn't think twice about it. So he tried because he could speak German, he tried to pour oil on troubled waters. And in the end, they could not be left together because one would have killed the other. And so one was taken away. Arthur was the one to go away, and yet he was the nicest of the two.
Yeah.
Arthur went away, and that left Willie there. Now, Terry and I know that in February the 1st, 1948, Dad got the tenancy of a small farm, the other end of Bampton. And this small farm never had running water. You had to pump it with an old-fashioned pump. In fact, that was my first job when I come home from school, aged 10, was to pump this water. And he had to dig. He was still working for his boss. But what happened was that Dad would get up at about 3:30 in the morning, and he'd ride his bicycle 2 miles up through the other end of the village, where he would milk his cows. He would then, by 6 o'clock, be working back down for his boss. He would ride his bike back down. And then at 8 o'clock, he would go back up again after he'd done his boss's milking. He would go and feed his pigs and see to the cows, etc. He would then go and work for his boss till 4 o'clock at night, which is when I come home from school. And then he would go back and milk his cows, feed his pigs, and do the farm work that he had to. Well, so it was during this period of time, February till May, that we were living on the farm where his boss was, but he was still running this new acquisition. And he wanted to dig a trench and lay a water pipe from the nearest mains right through this old farmyard to his dairy. And Willie, bless his heart, Willie offered to help him. No money exchanged, and Willie offered to help him. So the first night they went out, and come about 11 o'clock at night, remember the hours that Dad, I just said Dad worked, come about 11 o'clock at night, Dad had had enough. No, it was the other way round.
Yeah.
It was the other way round. Willie had had enough at about 10 o'clock at night, right? And Dad said, oh, no, we'll keep going, because he had the impulse to finish, get it done, sort of. And Willie said, no, Mr. Rice, no, we rest. So they went home. But Willie was so charged up with an Englishman beating him, being able to work longer hours than him, he loaded himself up, if I remember, on cheese. But he loaded himself up, and so the next night they went off again, and then come about 1 o'clock in the morning, Dad said, right, Willie, we call that enough. No, Mr. Rice, we keep going. And he kept going till they finished digging his trench to put the water pipe in. Now, how about that?
And another story was they were doing it with candles in glass jars. And was it our Dad put the pickaxe straight through it? Yeah.
Well, it's the old hurricane lamps.
Was it?
The old hurricane lamps with the oil and the glass dome to it.
Right.
You remember?
Yeah, I thought it was
yeah.
jam jars that they had candles in there.
And the two prisoners and also the other ones who came, did they ever eat with you during, or were they kept quite separate?
I can't remember.
I can't remember anything like that. Mum was a lovely, lovely, warm person, and I can't see Christmas going by without something like that happening. In fact, I just got a feeling that they did spend a Christmas with us. I can't, because the camaraderie between us was so good, I cannot imagine that would not happen. I can't remember any.
No, I can't.
I mean, was there any animosity against the prisoners from anybody in the area? Did you ever hear of anything?
Well, we wouldn't know.
You see, the farm we're talking about is isolated, so I don't think that they would have come down to the village much. I mean, we didn't. You made your own entertainment. We were living right down there. You went climbing in the trees and playing in ponds and that sort of thing. You had no need to go into the village for that. But being an adult, and I don't know what their restrictions might have been. an interesting thing, talking about the camaraderie, we had one German prisoner of war that used to visit us on a regular basis, and he was a bit, should we say, eccentric. And I remember him getting his hat, because it was a definite prisoners of war uniform. They didn't wear just dungarees, it was under the circles and then diamonds on, didn't it? And they had the particular hat. And he stood a prong in the ground and put his hat on it. And I don't know whether Terry had the air gun, but we had access to an air gun. And he taught us to shoot, didn't he? Just putting bullet holes through his hat. So it was, to me and Terry, it was a good time. And it's one of these things I had told you before, that this inspired me to become part of twinning. I've formed Oxford International Links, which covers all Oxford's twin cities, because it's not people that make wars. Those Germans were no different to us. Yeah. They had families, they had mothers, they had fathers. In fact, if I remember rightly, Willie was forced at gunpoint to go in the war.
I don't know.
He was forced at gunpoint. He didn't want to go to war, and he was forced at gunpoint to go to war. So it's leaders like Hitler that takes you to war, not the people. The people don't want. Look at the First World War, when they had a game, the Germans and the English had a game of football. Mm. You know, it's leaders that causes the trouble, not the people.
Mm. And you mentioned there that he was forced to go to war. Do you know, were they in the army or the air force? Was that ever talked about?
I'm pretty sure they were both army.
Yeah, I'd say.
Yeah.
And the prisoner of war uniform or clothing, could you describe what they wore?
Well, can you remember it all?
Only diamonds on the
one leg, on it, and a circle on the other, and then
what was on
the back?
In the middle.
A circle for a target. Bang. No, it was khaki, but they had these patches sewn on that was diamonds and circles. And a definite German hat. I searched my place through and through and through, but we did have a photo, because Dad, in the war years, and it should be brought back in my idea, in Bampton was a secondary modern school, but it was everything. Mm-hmm. You went through primary right through to your left school. If you passed the scholarship, then off you went to grammar school. And the senior lads, because you left school at 14 in those days, Dad took them for farming, because farming employs something like 80% of the population around here. And so Dad took them for farming. So once a week, this class of boys would go down to the farm, to Weald Farm, Bampton, and Dad would take them for farming. And I've got a picture of Willie the German on a load of muck, doing muck spreading. And I cannot find, I'm sorry, Danny, because I know you would have liked it, but I couldn't find it. But definitely, with his pink cone, he's spread them in your by hand, and then there's these boys all stood by a gate as part of it. So.
Mm. Can I ask you a couple of questions just about other things in the area? Because obviously you're quite near to Bryce Norton here. Do you ever remember seeing planes going over and things like that?
Yeah.
Could you tell me any more?
What are those buildings called horse gliders? They started off where they used to tow them behind the airplane, and then towards the end they got clever with it and had the tow rope put up, and they used to come down and snatch them in the takeoff.
Was what we were talking about? 13, we're talking about 70 years ago. If somebody committed a crime 70 years ago, could they still be done for it?
I thought so.
Well, my brother...
I'm going to turn the camera off.
I guess it depends on the crime.
Well, you're not getting out of this door until we get here. There's a place round here called DZ, called Drop-In Zone, and they used to do practice parachute drops. of one side. Was it people? I mean, you got to remember. I was 6. Terry was 9.
It was canisters.
Oh, you know, that tinfoil stuff that they did to put throw the radar off, wasn't it? The silver strips of paper and that sort of thing.
That was the Germans did that, wasn't it?
I don't know, Dad.
It is to put these aerials out. That tinfoil draped over the aerials and shorted it. So we couldn't speak to our people in Germany.
This DZ had parachutes being dropped there. And my brother, being older than me, was with the older lads in the village, and they'd all go right across to Shifford, nearly, and it's already out in Shifford way, and there's this drop-in zone there. And you get all this, I'm going to whisper, in case anybody's listening, right? These parachutes had dropped, we had silk that could make knickers for ladies. You had elastic that could hold them up, wasn't it? From the even tow ropes, wasn't it? There was some really thick elastic.
In scouting, they had the silk cord.
Well, that's it, the silk cord. It was incredible, and of course they used to nick it and bring it here.
And those horse gliders, I mean, there was a lot in the area, wasn't there?
Yes, yeah.
Was there ever any plane crashes? Did any planes come down around here?
One just at the back of here.
Really?
Yeah. That's the only one that was in Bampton, and that was about 1945. Because I remember the D-Day stuff when it had all the planes that took off, and we had the black and white stuff, paintwork markings on the planes, didn't they? But when they come here, Terry was with the scouts. He was in the scouts then, and we had all the local scouts would camp up the field near here. And this, I can't remember, what was it, a Wellington Land?
Wellington.
It was a Wellington bomber. Had got into trouble and was too low, and he was on fire, and it came right over our head, right over where they were camping, and crashed in the field at the back here. And the scouts were the first on the scene. We were sort of probably 2 or 3 minutes later, and that was the first time we saw dead bodies, because the plane was too low for them to give their parachutes a chance to open. And you saw this body actually indentured into the ground, wasn't it?
And when you think it's clay soil,
they hit it with a hell of a whack.
Yeah.
And Terry was the ploughman of the family, and up until, I would say, something like 1980s, when he would plough this field at the back here, bullets would come up.
Really?
Yeah.
Wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the whole crew died. Because that's when we learned how a plane would then come over and pay homage to those lads that had been killed. You know, you then later saw a fly past and his plane come right down ever so low and bank right round a couple of times round where the lads had died. It was, yeah. I can't remember where the prisoners of war were then. They would have been about.
No,
They must have been here, but because Willie was here in 1948, and when the plane crashed in 1945, so the German prisoners of war must have been. But I don't know. One of those things.
And you mentioned earlier about the Royal Corps signals men. Were there other army troops in the area?
Well, let me tell you, see, Bampton is ever so famous, you know, because when the war, victory over Europe, although it came through in code, Weald, Bampton was the first signal camp to get the news. And Weald, Bampton was also the first place to get the news that the atom bomb had dropped on Hiroshima. And that was a signal camp. It was received all the...
It was the main base for D-Day landing and everything, wasn't it?
Mm. It was a very important place. When there was the Royal Corps signals there, and there again, I mean, they played a big part in our community life. One of them was indeed our scoutmaster. So, you know, Yeah, it's happy memories. That you had more of a community effect. So there you had Germans living with us, and we enjoying it. A thing we haven't mentioned was slippers. Once again, saying the wonderful relationship that you had. You weren't allowed to pay the Germans for anything. That was against the law. But you could give them food, etc. And an interesting thing, Tony, whether you remember it, that on the farms, during harvest and haymaking, etc., farmers were allowed extra rations. So there was harvest rations and haymaking rations. And the German prisoners of war would also enjoy those extra rations. But if we wanted to repay a kindness at all, then there were obviously vegetables in the garden, that sort of thing, so you could do food, and eggs, of course, was another one. And so a wonderful relationship was built up. So when it came to the winter, I remember vividly, there was 3 of us were of an age, children of an age that could wear slippers. Our youngest brother, Colin, was too young. But I remember the Germans getting us to stand on a piece of felt about this thick.
About inch.
Yeah,
thick.
that's it. And they would draw round our feet. So we'd all know, oh, this is exciting, we'd stand on it, and they would draw with a pen round our feet. And they would do all of us, and off they would go, and they would get Hessian sacks, which was in abundance on the farm in those days. I mean, it was just, everything came in Hessian sacks. And they would strip the sacks off, so they got the strips of Hessian. And then they would plait the Hessian into plaits about the width of my finger. And then with lines and lines of Hessian plaited, they would then stitch that to your outline of your feet onto the felt. And they would build up, going round and round and round, and build it up until they had got it just shaped right for a slipper. And then finishing the piece de la resistance was the old cardboard milk bottle top that you put your finger through the hole to put the straw through to drink your milk. With that, they would get wool and go round and round and round and round it, and then when it was totally full of wool, they would cut round the cardboard where the cardboard would be. They would cut it and then put a piece of wool inside there and make a pom-pom, and that was the decoration on your slipper. Absolutely marvellous, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And if I remember rightly, Ted, that they also, because you could get dye in those days for dyeing your clothes, etc. And I got a feeling that they dyed these Hessian sacks pale blue, I thought, to give your slipper a bit of individuality, as it were.
Because they made us toys as well.
That's right. Well, Arthur, being the carpenter, that's it.
Yeah.
What? Can you tell me about the toys?
Yeah. These horses was half a log, which was the body, and I can't remember
Well, then they would
what
put
the
legs into it, and they was he was an Arthur, as I say, he was a softer person than Willie. Willie was a very quiet and reserved man, whether he got problems at home or because he was from East, and therefore I'm sure word would have got through that the Russians was coming over and giving them a rough time as they were coming over. I'm sure he would have got word of that. And so he was different, but Arthur, Terry's telling you about it, he was a craftsman.
and they made bracelets. They get a flat piece of, well, iron, I would say, and then this plastic. During the war years, you could get this plastic. It was either that thick or round, about the size that when you rewire a plug, and that about that size, and then they used to do brooches.
He's telling you this. He's a fibber because they taught him to do it. And when he was flogging them round Bampton. Because you taught me. You got a ring, an ordinary curtain ring, and he went, you get double thickness, And you would go round and then loop it through and then round and loop it through like a little hitch. And he was flogging it.
So it was bound around with the different coloured plastic.
Yeah.
That's right.
thread sort of.
When you looked at it, you thought it was a proper job, you know.
Yeah, because didn't it then got a safety pin and put a coloured button on it or something, they were reflective, in the middle. And as you say, it looked very, very attractive.
Did you make much?
No, you know, we're frightening impacts want to be listening to this. Well,
Moving on then. So could I just, one thing I didn't ask, the two prisoners, how old were they?
oh, you got me there. I would have said mid-20s.
Not old enough to have children of their own then? Or if they'd been away at
If
war?
they did, you see, we weren't old enough. Had we been in our teens, then we would have talked to them about families. I don't know, Ted, do you?
We did try to have picked up the German language.
Hmm.
You know, the older you get, you try to do things, don't you?
Did they both speak English?
No. Oh, they probably did towards the end. Yeah, they probably would have done towards the end.
But you communicated all right with them?
Dad communicated with them, and as kids, wait, thank you, yes. And it's like when where's it the English when they go abroad, they wave their hands and think that's how you speak Spanish.
It's like Joe said, that there was no trouble of saying you keep away from them prisoners of war or anything like that. You just got in amongst them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, as I say, it's not the people that causes problems, it's the governments.
I wanted to ask you something else about in the village as well. Was there a home guard?
Oh, you really want to hear about Bampton's Home Guard?
Yes, please. It's not going to be it.
Right. No. They actually used to practice on the fields around here.
Mm-hmm.
So Mr. Collins, which was Dad's boss, he was also in the Home Guard. I mean, the old things where they were on parade. So talk about Dad's army, to watch them on parade. It was fascinating, and Captain Webb, just down the road there, he gave the order, right, turn. Everybody turned left bar Dad. Dad turned right. Then Dad saw them go the other way, so he thought, I've got this wrong. So he turned back left, and he said, I've got another rollicking for you, were the only one. But then they would have manoeuvres across the fields, and they'd have bits of wood for guns. I mean, there just wasn't the guns to go around, so they had bits of wood. And then, you know, in a Christmas cracker, you've got that thing that goes bang. Well, they used to get them in a batch and tie that to the end of the bit of wood, and then they'd keep pulling that to go bang to shoot you're dead. Hey, I shot you, why aren't you dead, you know? They were hilarious. It really was, wasn't it? Because all those kids would go and sort of watch it all, you know, and see, our dad in the army, wow.
So what did your dad do then? Did he have to do patrols around the village and things like that? Or?
Oh yeah. In Bampton, where I actually live now, in a little village called Lew, right, which is a mile and a half, 2 miles outside of Bampton, and there's a Nissen hut to this day. It overlooks RAF Bryce, and that's where Dad spent a lot of time in the Home Guard. So they have to do night shift in the Home Guard. And what they did, because they were all farm workers together, they would take it in turns to sleep and have one sort of keep an eye out in case the captain come along or whatever. So, and those buildings are still up there to this day. So if you want to take a photograph of them,
It was
interesting to see what they are.
because when we went up to Lou, sing carols at the Christmas service, they stopped us.
did they?
Yeah.
And of course here on the bridge at Bampton was these enormous, I would imagine it was 45-gallon barrels filled with concrete. thinking back at it now, I mean, at the time, they were just these enormous things, weren't they, painted black and white,
Yeah.
that they would roll across the road if Bampton was going to be attacked.
Yes. Then there was the air raid shelter.
Well, the school had its own air raid shelter that the village would use, and you'd all have to wear your gas mask to school. And that's where we were at Dunbar. Our sister had a Mickey Mouse one, and we didn't.
Yeah.
And then you had to go to the town hall in Bampton for gas mask tests. And the way they used to test the gas mask was that you had to put it on and breathe in, and they stick a bit of paper on the bottom, and if it stayed on, then obviously it was working right. If it didn't, then you obviously were getting air seeping around the sides. So that was quite a common thing to have to do.
Were there any air raids in the area? Were any bombs dropped?
WWII had one or two, but nothing much.
The first bomb fell just over there.
Was there?
By the signal camp.
I don't know, it was before 43 then, no.
Yes.
When we lived in Somerset, they were bombing Bristol, and they would come out over the Mendips by us and go back in to empty their load.
Yeah, I remember seeing when Cardiff copped it, the Germans in a V formation bombers coming overhead, and that was sort of just time to get dusk, and they were going overhead, and of course searchlights was everywhere, and on the Mendips there was loads of them, and they were around Bampton. There was the searchlights to try and catch enemy airplanes at night. Yeah.
And you mentioned about raw signals here and everything like that. Were there any Americans in the area?
Oh yeah, they they built it, didn't they?
What?
The signal camp. There's all there is terrible trouble in the village. I'm a lovely lady called Ruth Shergold can remember this better than we can. There was black Americans, and white Americans, and never the twain should meet. But the black ones were nearly all Methodists, and our mum was Methodist, and we had enjoyed some of the most beautiful, spiritual, even songs you could wish for. All these deep black American voices singing spirituals in Bampton Methodist Church. Absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And of course the camp was in the throes of being built and improved upon. As I understand it, there was 4 big aerials, and those 4 aerials had to be in an accurate alignment with the areas that was transmitting from the different foreign countries. And so it was a very, very skillful job to put all these different aerials out.
Where exactly was the camp?
From here, southwest from here. In fact, the nearest area would be in the field at the back of here.
And
Just
that's
the top of Place Furlong, wouldn't it?
And the road which runs down here is?
That's Weald Road. It's called Weald Street. And so you are in the hamlet of Weald, which is part of Bampton. In fact, geographically, it's bigger than Bampton. But Weald, Bampton is where you are. Weald was the signal camp that played a very important part in the war. And when Terry and I came here, the road leading to it was just a mud track. So the Yanks came in with their big bulldozers and cleared it and bulldozed it and laid a hardcore road to it. But the Americans played a big part. And you can see the children in the area to this day.
And you mentioned about the black and white Americans. And were there any incidents of conflict?
You would have to speak to Ruth Shergold about that, but yes, there was. I don't know. I mean, we weren't bothered with that sort of thing. All we know is that the chapel on the Sunday was a smashing time.
Well, I don't think I've got many questions left for you.
Okay. Right.
There we go.
Terry, do tell him about the incident when you were still in Somerset, when your dad went out. When that,
Oh, with the Brussels sprouts down?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a cracker.
it's wonderful.
That's a cracker.
And the Home Guard got called out because a German bomber had come down. And so Dad got out of bed and come down and thought, oh, I better take something. And he picked up what he thought was a piece of wood. And
To kill the Germans. This is the Home Guard.
they went off down across the field, and a friend from next door, which he was also the cowman on the farm, and they went down to see if there was any prisoners to be taken. When they got down there was no prisoners to be taken, and he came back and went to bed, and he propped this thing by the back door and went to bed, went to milking, and he had a look at this stick that he picked up from the garden, and it was a Brussels sprout stick.
He was going to kill the Jerrys.
And that was when you were down in Somerset.
Somerset, yeah.
Well, the friend from across the road, he was a neurotic, wasn't he, Mr. Mills? And then he got his tin out there and he come round banging on Dan's door. The Germans are here, the Germans are here. But well, one of the most macabre things that Terry and I experienced at the time down there, and yet it didn't faze us one bit, was an airplane, it was an English plane, an airspeed Oxford, had been doing training flights outside Bristol. And he come up, he hit a tree. So on the way to school, we're going past where this airspeed Oxford had hit the tree. We want one, looking around, see what we find. We picked up a glove and still had the hand in it. That didn't faze us one bit. Hey, look at this, you know. Crazy. And you thought, well, I would have been less than 6 sort of thing. Amazing.
But the thing that stands out at that time was when that German plane come down, was his name Ron Fair? Ron Fair took a machine gun out of the aeroplane and brought it to school.
Oh, yeah.
Please,
I will get the teachers to respect me.
And the police turned up.
the police turned up, yeah. Who's got this machine?
So, I mean, were you told off, or were you warned about doing that sort of thing around here as well?
Yeah,
If planes
yeah.
came down?
You were not allowed to steal from... See, that was another thing, wasn't it, Ted? The airplane glass, you
Oh,
could make
yes.
rings out of it, couldn't you?
That's right.
You know, if an airplane crashed anywhere around here, if you would get there before the police or when nobody was looking and steal the airplane glass, you did say it'd be all right 70 years after, didn't you? And you could cut it, you could carve, because it's perspex, and you could carve it and you
Yeah.
carve little rings out, didn't you?
Yes. The number of times I got married.
You cheapskate. Okay. I'm surprised you didn't give him one of your brooches.
So that's probably the engagement.
That's why it never lasted.
So there were quite a few planes did come down there. I mean, the one came down over the
Yeah.
field there, you said, but there's other ones came down as well then.
Not so much in this area, it was where we were in Somerset, yeah, there's a lot, so forever, because Bristol, you see, right, so 12 miles from Bristol, and that's the roadway, not the crow. When the crow flies, I suppose you're in about 8 miles from Bristol. Or the Junkers fan, whatever it is.
Well, thank you very much for your time. It's been very nice speaking with you, and
No,
leave it there.
nice to meet you.
Thank you.